Hi, this is David Turner, and I'm going to walk through this assignment on less, which is part of my web page programming course. So in this assignment, I'm asking you to use less to generate the CSS for one or more pages in your site. And less is what's called a CSS generator. So you write less script and you write scripts in the less syntax, then use a processing program to convert that to CSS. And what I want you to do is to use less in client-side mode. In other words, that the browser will run JavaScript. The JavaScript running in the browser will convert the less script into CSS. And what I would like for you to do is to illustrate these 5 features of less in your web page. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And I'm going to close a bunch of these things. And I have my Cloud9 account here. I've got a workspace called HTML5, and that's where I'm doing my work. Now, this is the folder for the HTML intermediate assignment. This is the folder for the CSS assignment. I'm going to create a new folder for the less assignment. And I'll copy an HTML file into it. And let's go ahead and edit that. I'm just going to simplify this. There we go. Now, as you see here, we're using this link element to include a style sheet, styles.css. And what we're going to do is we're going to use client-side less. And so that means that we're not going to load styles.css, we're going to load another file called styles.less. The type will remain a text/CSS, but the relation is stylesheet/less. And what we'll do is add some JavaScript here to that when it runs, it will search for a link element, all the link elements with this, with the rel property set to stylesheet/less. When it finds this link element, it'll read the href attribute, load this file, and process it as a less file, as a less script, and generate the CSS rules from it. So here, the JavaScript, you can load it, so you've got basically the less, the JavaScript will contain what's called a less compiler or a less translator. And you can store the less compiler in your website, as a JavaScript file, or you can load it through the Content Delivery Network, the CDN, and that's what I'm going to do. So let's go to this website, and here is the site for less, and it brings you into getting started. And I recommend reading all this. I read this. It's hard to do this and understand it fully without reading. We're going to skip over the command line usage, and we're just going to look at this client-side usage. And we're going to skip over that and find less CDN. So this script tag is one way to load the less compiler through a content delivery network. There it is. So now what we need is a file called styles.less. I'll create that here. And we'll look at its contents. And this can be ordinary CSS. The less compiler will just copy it over, or it can be normally it's CSS with some additional less syntax thrown in to provide additional functionality and additional ability to organize your CSS logic in a more readable manner. So let's start with defining giving all paragraph elements a color of blue, say. R, G, B, there it is. So we'll just start with that simple rule. And so let's add a paragraph. And add a paragraph. So this should come up, the text should be blue. So I've already started this, and here it is running. That's an old experiment. Here it is. I'm a paragraph, and it is blue. All right, that's good. And so that's basically how you get started. You know, this, you know, you link to your less file using this syntax, and you need to load this less compiler written in JavaScript. From the command line, you run less is also written in JavaScript, but you run it with Node.js. All right, so now let's go back to the assignment, and you see that I'm looking for illustrations of these 5 different features of less. Let's start with variables. And let's take a look. So here's a paragraph, and let's add a title to it. I'm a title. There we go. And let's suppose we want the title to be the same color as the paragraph. So we'll do it like that. And when we load this thing, we see we've got it. And if we change the color, say to green, what we need to do is modify both of these rules. And now we'll switch it to green. But the variables let you, so it's perhaps common at the early design time to change these color values, which you reuse throughout your site in many different rules, and or several rules anyway, more than one. So in that case, it's convenient to set the variable. So let's call this variable base. So it'll be base colon and sharp 00 ff. Let's turn it into red, ff0000. And now when we specify the color, we just use the variable name instead, and that does a replacement for us. So now if we want to change the color throughout the site, the base color, and I'm calling it base, that's what they use in their tutorial, And all we need to do is change this value in this one location here. That change will propagate through your code. Now this is not CSS. This is less syntax. And remember that these variables are not supported in CSS. They're only supported in less. All right, let's see how that works. There it is, red. Now we change this back. Let's put an FF there and see what happens. So we change the color in one location, changes the color throughout the site. All right, that's an illustration of variables. Now I want to talk about mixins. And a mixin is it's like kind of like inheritance. Now let's take an example. We'll call it I don't know. Let's call it something like, we'll create a class called normal, and we'll give a color of black. Actually, let's use the color. Let's use the base. We'll use the base color, and we'll do it like that, and then we'll have say text text align center. And so now the paragraph, so what we want to do is we want the paragraph to be normal. We want all paragraphs, so we want these two rules. So let's suppose we wanted this, we wanted it to look like this. So we want both the paragraph and H1 to have those settings. But in addition to this, say for H1, we want to have what is it? Text? No, font style. I think italic. Yeah, just to have a difference. And so you see what we're doing is we're copying this this set of sort of this common set of rules across to two different places. Let's just see what that looks like. There it is. And rather than doing that copy, what we can do instead is we use, it's kind of like an inheritance. What do they call it? They call it mixins. So we're going to, we want paragraphs to be normal. So we just put the class name, we just put a dot there. We just use the name of the class with a dot. And we can do that in two places. There it is. So this is how what we do is we take the rules from the normal class and we mix it in with the rules for these other rule sets. There it is. Except this is not in italics. What happened? Oh, I must have gotten rid of that. This is text align center. Oh, we didn't. I erased the wrong one. So this should be a font style italic. Sorry, I erased the wrong rule. So I'll put that back in there. There we go. So that's an illustration of mixins. So now we've covered variables and we've covered the concept of a mixin. Let's go down the list. How about parent selector? So the idea of a parent selector is, and you can refer to a parent, and it's used for these kinds of, what did I call it here? Mixins, oh, nested rules. Actually, maybe I will I'll list nested rules first. Nested rules are very much like mixins. A nested rule is something like the following, that this is a paragraph, and let's have another paragraph on another paragraph. This time we're gonna put a span around this thing. Oops. And this span will have a class. Call it. I'll call it. Emp for emphasized. And so there's nothing set for that class, so it'll just show up in a normal way like that. But let's define that class. Dot env, and we'll do font style bold. And let's see, that should come out bold, and it does not. So this is the class font style, is it, or font weight, that's what it is, isn't it? Font weight, sorry. Font weight. And there it is. Now that's bold. So maybe what we want is we only want this env maybe for H1. You know, we want to define env just for paragraphs. So we go p env like this. So let me show you the difference there. So the maybe it's not a great example, but this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm a title. Let's give this a a span, and we'll emphasize that. So we'll do class equals env. So now we'll see that. Sorry, what did I do wrong there? I didn't save. And is that emphasized? You know what? This is not what I want to do. This is class equal env. And here, the font weight is bold. But see, headings are already bold. See, H1 is already bold, I believe. Let me see if I can do that. Let's test that concept. Its font weight would be normal. Maybe I got that wrong. So how do I make title bold? So title is in this class. So basically, this is a pretty good illustration. What I want is that in H1, I want env classes to have a font weight of bold. So this is called a nested what? Nested rule. So, you know, in an H1 element, there's another element which has a class of env, and the font weight should be bold. Let's see if that works. There it goes. Now that's bold. And here, maybe instead of that, we want to use, you know, a little bit more. We want the font style to be normal. Is that what it is? Normal? I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's also normal. There, it doesn't look good, but it's just playing around. So this is called a nested rule set. And so here, when we have all P's are normal, but P's that are emps also have a font weight of bold. So I'm going to move that up there and make that nested as well. So any paragraph that has an env class in it, an element with an env class, will have font weight of bold. Let's check to see if that works. That looks good. And let's, so that's called nesting. Now what about this idea of a parent selector? The parent selector, I mean, typically, I'll show you the typical example here. Here's the typical example. This is what they use in their documentation, in their tutorial. So we have another paragraph, and then we'll say I'm a link. Here we go. So I'm a link. And just go somewhere. I'm a link. To lowercase. So that's without any special styling. There's the link right there. Let's make it. Let's change the color to green when we hover over it. So the way we would do that is we would say for the H element, we have the pseudo selector hover, and we'll change the color to green. I'll just type it in there like that. Now that's green. And let's suppose we want the A element in its normal state, the color will be black. There are two rules here for A elements. So there's the link that's black, and then I hover to make it green. Now these can be combined as follows. That we use this ampersand to refer to the parent element, which is A, and then we follow it with the pseudo selector. and then specify the color of green there. This will give us the same effect. There it is. It's not a great example. Let me see if I can give another example. When if a, let's look here. The well, that's the main use for this parent element. Anyway, that's an illustration. I think that's good enough. Now there's one more thing to do, and that is to talk about functions. And I'm going to jump to that language feature here. And here it is. Mixins as functions. I want to see functions. Mixins as functions. Function reference. Here it is. Function reference. This is so these are different functions: image size, image width, image height, convert a number from one unit to another. And I'm going to pick something which I think is easy to illustrate. Remove or change the unit of a dimension, get unit, gradient, string functions. Here's it. Let me look here. This is the color channel, color definition functions, color operation functions. Let's do that. Color operations generally take parameters in the same units as the values they are changing. And so saturate, increase the saturation of a color in the HSL color space by an absolute amount. And these are the parameters. So we, I don't get this. Maybe I'm not going to do that one. Lighten. Increase the lightness of a color in the HSL color space. So everything is in HSL color space. Let's take a look. How about this one? Fade. Set the absolute transparency of a color. So what we can do here is, oh, I see. They were using this HSL. I don't understand that HSL. So this would be color channel definitions. Color definitions, HSL. Creates an opaque color object from hue, saturation, and lightness. So we have hue, and we have saturation and lightness. We'll just use this. So here's an example. Hue, saturation, and lightness. Let's suppose we want to change this color up here to the result of a calculation. So the hue is 90. So this will be saturation and lightness. Let's take a look at what that looks like. What is 90? So it goes from 0 to 360, I think. Let me check that again. 0 to 360. So the hue is specified as an integer between 0 and 360. Saturation and lightness is a percentage or a number between 0 and 1. The percentage. Oh, so they use percents here. So maybe what I'll do there is I'll just call this a 1. 1.0. 1.0. So let's see what 90 is. 90 is white. Maybe I didn't do that right. HSL. Am I invoking the function correctly? HSL, and then we have to use these parentheses. It's HSL, and then we use these parentheses. These should be okay. Let me try something other than 90. I'll do 120. I don't think 90 is white. Maybe the problem is these values. Lightness. So maybe lightness is, make that a 0. Lightness makes it white, essentially. So we give a lightness value, and this is saturation. Let's give a saturation of 5. And let's see what that looks like. It's like green. And set this back to 90. Anyway, if you work in the HSL color space, this is one way to work in the HSL color space. You would use a function, and this converts it to RGB. And let's see how that works. So I open up this web console. Let's look at the elements, and you'll see this paragraph. We'll have a color. See this 80BF40. That's what's output by that HSL function when we pass in these values. Once again, this is hue and saturation and lightness. So there it is. This is my my illustration of what I learned, and we're just scraping the surface here. And I recommend, if you think you're going to be a designer, web page designer, to spend time with this system and learn this, especially if you're going to work in CSS. If you're going to do a lot of work in CSS, one of these CSS preprocessors, LESS or SAS, I think is definitely the way to go. All right, that's it for this this assignment.